Hello, folks! It's me again, Amanda Enderman, your trusty tour guide in the wonders of the wonderful city, also known as Rio de Janeiro. On this video, you may be wondering about the theme of the video, since you may have, or you probably already read the title, saying "Treating Rio." And you may be wondering, treating Rio, Amanda, but treating Rio of what? Treating Rio, what do you mean by treating Rio? And yes, in this video, I'm going to talk about the other issue besides the distribution of drinking water, which pervaded the city of Rio in its beginnings, which I mentioned in the previous video entitled "Hydrating Rio," was the many diseases that took over the city every summer. Yes, I am gonna talk about diseases in this video, namely the diseases that took over the city of Rio in its beginnings. Okay, folks. So let me make this quite clear. I'm not talking about diseases in Rio currently, okay? I'm talking about colonial Rio, okay? One day I am gonna get to current Rio, not only in regards to diseases and other issues, but also the good things, of course. But for now, if you recall, we are still in colonial. We are still talking about colonial times. All right. By the way, parenthesis. If you're new to this channel, if you've just arrived now, be sure to see the previous videos, especially the introductory video entitled Nice to Meet You All, so that you can have an idea of what this channel is about, who I am, and what we're doing, what we're doing here. All right. And if you like what I do, don't forget to subscribe, share the channel with as many people as you know, so that this channel can continue to grow and one day hopefully become a robust YouTube channel. All right. So going to the actual theme of the video. So before we talk about Rio itself and even Brazil itself, as usual, we have to go back in time a little bit. All right. And in this particular video, we're going to have to go a little further in time than normal. Okay. Namely to medieval Europe. And you may be wondering, but Amanda, we are talking about colonial Rio and colonial Brazil, that you just said a little while ago, right? That would be the 1500s. So why do you have to go all the way back to medieval Europe? So the thing is that, well, a lot of the habits that the European explorers, in general, brought here originated in medieval and Renaissance era Europe, and those were the habits that they brought here. So in order to talk about the origin of those habits to begin with, you have to go back to medieval Europe. So, specifically, the habits that I'm referring to are the habits regarding hygiene. Okay, so there's this very how can I say, there's this very common misconception about the Middle Ages, that people think that people in the entire Middle Ages were dirty. They had no hygienic habits whatsoever. They never took baths, and they smell bad, and all of that. So you may be asking, well, Amanda, I've heard of that. So, Amanda, is that true or isn't it? Well, the answer is it depends. It depends on whether you're talking about the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages. Okay, the actual Middle Ages. As a matter of fact, in Portuguese, we refer to these two periods. We refer to the Dark Ages as the High Middle Ages, roughly translating, and we refer to the Middle Ages as Low Middle Ages. So, first of all, let me situate you all a bit. Okay, so the entire medieval period, goes from the fall of the Roman Empire, of the Western Roman Empire, whose capital was Rome. All right, basically the fall of the city of Rome itself, until in 600 something, if I'm not mistaken, until the fall of Constantinople, which was the capital of which at this time was the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. And this period is divided into the Dark Ages, which went from right when the Roman Empire, right when Rome fell, until the 10th century. Oh yes, until the 10th century. And the actual Middle Ages are the period from the 10th century until the 15th century, until 1453. All right. So in the Dark Ages, people, if we are talking about the Dark Ages, this notion that people had no hygiene is completely false. All right. In the Dark Ages, people pretty much kept the same habits as were used in the Roman Empire. So if you recall, the Roman Empire was the time in which Europe was able to have canalized sewer, canalized water with the aqueducts, public baths, saunas, and all of that. So we still had that in Europe, in the lands which were formerly part of the Roman Empire. So people still had this habit of going to public baths and steam rooms. All right, but the thing is, in the 10th century is the period where the habits begin to change. Okay, and why? Because of a little thing called plague. Okay, and not just the famously known Black Death either. All right, the Black Death was not the first pandemic that ravaged Europe and Asia, and neither it would be the last. All right. So a few things, of course, but the reason why we talk so much about the Black Death or bubonic plague is because it changed so much of European life and culture and habits, and a few things, of course, contributed to it, which were the growing trade between Europe and Asia through the Silk Road. That was one of them, and also the ascension of commerce. So once the Black Death started in Asia, okay, in the specifically in the Mongolian steppes, it naturally went to Europe. Okay, so it was around this time that even the habits of hygiene that the Europeans had drastically changed, because basically there was a theory that developed at this time regarding the possible cause of the spread of the plague, which was the miasmic theory. Okay, so what was the miasmic theory? It said that the disease basically was floating around in the air, okay, and people would catch it through their pores. So the disease would enter through their skin and then it would contaminate them. All right. And also, that's why the disease that unfortunately is still prevalent today, called malaria. That's where the name malaria comes from. Comes from the Latin word for bad airs. All right. So, so how can I say? So it was around this time that the doctors and also the Christian church spread the notion that since the disease was in the air and you caught it through your skin, through it entering your pores, taking baths was no longer good for you, because when you take a bath, what happens is you remove the dirt from your skin, the natural oils and the dirt, that may accumulate there, that naturally accumulate there. So with this, you lose that layer of protection, as they said. So it was advisable for you to not take many baths in order to create a protective layer of dirt and natural oils and all of that. Can you imagine if such a theory persisted to this day? Oh my goodness! Glad it it's no longer a thing, right? So baths became something unhealthy in Europe at this time. And many people wonder, but Amanda, so how often did Europeans take baths at this period? Once or twice a week? No. Once or twice a month? No. Once or twice a year would be more exact. So you can imagine the cultural shock that took place when the Europeans, bringing these habits of very little bathing, came here and encountered the natives here in Brazil, which had basically the opposite habit. The natives here in Brazil, oh my goodness, they would take 4 or 5 baths a day, especially, which isn't absurd, which isn't an absurd notion if you consider how hot it gets in certain parts of Brazil. Incidentally, one thing that you always ask me about Rio, you think that it never gets cold in Rio? Well, if you think that, think again. The reason why I'm wearing this jacket, folks, it's because today it hit 18 degrees with a real feel of 16 degrees. well, well, so this is why I'm wearing a jacket even. All right. So, if I take it off, I'm gonna be very cold. So, but of course, in some areas of Brazil, such as the northeast and especially the north of Brazil, incidentally, where the Amazon jungle is, it's piping hot all year long. There it is actually piping hot all year long. Not in Rio, folks. So, anyways, um, considering that, it's not far fetched to imagine that the natives would take 4 or 5 baths a day. In fact, when the Europeans saw this, they even thought that the indigenous peoples might even be amphibian because they spend so much time in water. All right. And as a matter of fact, incidentally, the Europeans, of course, they brought diseases to the natives. Unfortunately, I mean, it wasn't this particular. It wasn't always. I mean, it wasn't always something provoked by the Europeans, of course, but the fact remains that one of the very first diseases that the indigenous caught as soon as the Europeans first got here was our very well known flu. Yes, the common cold, the regular quarter meal routine common cold. Before the Europeans got here, the indigenous never even had a common cold in their lives. Imagine that. So imagine living your whole life without a common cold. My goodness. so so anyways, but of course that but of course, along just as it happened in the time of the bubonic plague, when right in the borders of Europe, the Mongolians would on purpose throw corpses that had died from the plague through catapults to their enemies in order in an early form of biological war. The same thing happened here in colonial Brazil. All right. So if when you come here in Rio, one place that you'll definitely want to visit is the Parque Lage. And the Parque Lage, back in colonial times, was a setting for biological war, because you see the Portuguese man who took over those lands, in order to keep the indigenous away, um, he scattered the clothes from people who had died from diseases like smallpox, for instance. Okay, or even plagues or colds or what have you. So we did have also biological warfare here in Brazil during colonial times. That was actually a fact. But now, going to our virtual tour of today, I know that this is something that you very much, or at least I hope that this is something that you very much look forward to in my videos. So if we were to do a virtual tour today, we would start by, oh my goodness, once again my tablet is trolling me. So we would start by sorry. We would start by, let me look for it here. Let's see. Uh, so we would start by this place over here, which is called Beco dos Barbeiros, or translating Barber's Alley. And you may be wondering, but Amanda, why are you talking about a barber's alley? What do barbers have to do with disease? If it were a video about fashion in Rio, I would in colonial times I would understand. But what do barbers have to do with disease? Well, everything, because you see, as far back as the European Middle Ages, and also this was brought to colonial Brazil, the barbers, they were actually barber surgeons. In fact, that little thing, that little pole that you normally see in barber shops that are willing to look vintage, the red and white one, that was originated because it was a symbol to symbolize the white cloth, the white cloths that they would use in order to stop bleedings, and the blood in the white cloth. So that's what that symbolizes, actually, because the barbers, as well as shaving the men, of course, they would also perform amputations, bloodlettings, and also they would pull out teeth. Okay, and all of that with very little anesthetic. What they had by means of anesthetic was basically a lot of alcohol, drinking alcohol, basically, and when it came specifically to pulling out teeth, they would use a paste made out of clothes applied to the actual tooth, which would numb the area, but not so much. Okay, so imagine doing all that with only that as an anesthetic. Oh boy. All right. So well, amputations. Well, normally it happens when you have a gangrenous a member of your of limb. I'm sorry, a gangrenous limb in your body. Perhaps a gunshot wound or something like that would make a limb, an arm or a leg gangrenous and such. Oh, and they of course would also remove bullets. That was another thing that surgeons at that time would do a lot. All right, but specifically pulling out teeth is a very interesting fact because it's precisely during Renaissance era Europe, or better yet, the Middle Ages in the 15th century, with the discoveries and the colonization of India and the Americas. That's when the teeth of the population in Europe begin going rotten, literally. And why is that? Well, one little word: sugar, right? Because, well, in the Roman Empire was very big. It encompassed all of Europe and some of Asia. So Romans would have quite a bit of access to sugar, coming from and other spices coming from various parts of the empire. So it wasn't that much of a big deal. But you see, with the fall of the Roman Empire, that access was lost. And for centuries at that, the Europeans would only get back that access with the rediscovery, I would say, of India, of the East Indies, or India, and the West Indies, the colonies. Sugar and spice and everything nice, by the way, as the nursery rhyme goes. So imagine going for centuries without ever knowing the taste of sugar. I mean, and then after centuries, having it in abundance. So it's basically, imagine living your whole life without knowing sugar, and then all of a sudden you taste it. I mean, we all know that sugar is addictive. So imagine too the Europeans in the 15th century. I mean, they would do entire sweets made out of sugar. I mean, it wasn't a fruit with sugar or something else with sugar. No, it was the entire sweet made out of sugar. Okay, and they had no idea that sugar, because of the bacteria that we constantly have already within us, sugar causes cavities, and cavities make your teeth go rotten. And aside from giving you really bad breath, your teeth end up, rotting. All right. So, but in colonial times, well, normally today, nowadays, if you have a cavity, even a small one, you just go to your dentist, and your dentist will fill the cavity, and that will be it. Problem solved. But you see, back in colonial times, the only hope that you would have is to pull out that teeth, and hopefully the cavity that was in that teeth wouldn't spread. Little did they know, because they would pull out the one teeth and continue eating sugar. So it ended up being like a vicious cycle. Little did they know, right? So aren't you all glad that nowadays you know better? And so always brush your teeth, folks. Don't forget. So you don't want to lose them. So aside from that, another thing that the barbers did was bloodletting. All right, and you may be asking, but why, Amanda? Why would they do bloodlettings on purpose? Because you see, in the Middle Ages, and that was because of another medieval theory, all right, which was the theory of the four humors. So they believed that the human body was composed of four humors, which were the equivalent of the four elements. So on Earth, on planet Earth, we have four elements: earth, air, water, and fire. So they thought that in the same fashion, the human body was composed of four humors, which were blood, phlegm, and black and yellow bile, both coming from your liver. Both that come from your liver. And they would use, in fact, people's urine as a way of determining how much of each humor did the person have. And they believed that diseases were nothing but imbalances of these four humors. That's what they thought of. So regarding so combined with the miasmic theory, they thought that the disease would enter through your pores, and then it would cause an imbalance in the humors. So they would then they would then make cuts in certain points of the body, with either scalpels, precision knives, or in the case of Europe, or using leeches, uh, or so then the letting out of blood would then balance the humors again. All right, and in fact, the little I forgot the name of this in English, but this thing that you see here in the middle of the street, this was actually put there on purpose, so that's the blood would flow there. All right, and as a matter of fact, the streets back in colonial Brazil, and as well as medieval Europe, were terrible in regards to cleanliness. Basically, here basically animal feces, animal entrails, human excrement also would be all thrown in the streets unceremoniously. In fact, people would, in order to pee, there were no toilet seats. There were no handy dandy toilet seats like we have nowadays. So they would use piss pots, roughly, to put it bluntly. And after they were full, they would simply throw the urine out the window. All right. In fact, there was a law in a certain point in colonial Brazil that said that in order so that people wouldn't receive, a whole piss pot of urine on their heads, literally. The law stated that before throwing your urine off the street, you were required to yell, "There goes the water," so that the person that was walking in the street would at least, get a heads up, and have the time to deviate from the urine that was falling down. So you can imagine that Rio at this time was far from the wonderful city. In fact, as far as the beginning of the 20th century, Rio was known as the city of death. And I think now, after all this, you can imagine why. Okay, so speaking of which, but in fact, these epidemics that ravaged the city of Rio, in some cases, some say that sometimes in Portuguese there's a saying, sometimes there are evils that come for good. All right, and in the case of roughly translating, and in the case of the diseases in Rio, um, some of them actually were blessings in disguise, because they contributed to the urbanization of certain areas. For instance, which is our second point in our tour, our very well known by now Lago da Carioca. Okay, and that is precisely because of this right here that we would visit. This was the hospital of the Third Order of Penance, whose construction was ordered, of course, by the Franciscan monks, which inhabited the convent of Saint Anthony, which is on top of the hill that I already showed you in previous videos. And it was precisely an epidemic of smallpox in 1613 that stimulated the urbanization of that area of the Lago da Carioca. It also contributed. So there you go. Sometimes there's a little blessing in disguise, even in the worst of times. All right, let that be something positive for you to one more positive thing for you to take from this video. So our third and final stop in our tour today would be the a hospital in Rio, which is still a working hospital to this day, which is the Santa Casa de Misericordia. It's this hospital over here. So the Santa Casa de Misericordia was actually its foundation is attributed to the priest José de Anchieta, and it's believed that it was first built in the 1500s, and and its very first purpose was to treat the crew of a Spanish expedition run by let me check my little cheat note over here, run by Diogo Flores or Diego Flores Valdez. Diogo would be the Portuguese equivalent of this name. So Diego Flores Valdez, which his expedition was going to the Straits of Magellan. And so the disease that they treated, and this was in 1582. So the disease, there were many diseases, of course, that the sailors needed to be treated of, but one of the more prevalent ones was, of course, scurvy. And for those of you who don't know what that is, gladly nowadays, very few of us know what that is unless we Google or study it, because nowadays it's very rare for someone to have that. Because you see, scurvy is a disease that you get by not consuming enough vitamin C. All right, so be sure to get your vitamin C, folks. So, also very important. Otherwise, you're going to end up with very inflamed and bleeding gums. All right, and I've discovered that even cabbage has vitamin C. Go figure. Go figure. I was thinking that it was before I thought that it was mostly fruits, but go figure. Even vegetables have it. So there you go. Um, and you may be wondering, but Amanda, you did mention before that the Portuguese were the ones who expelled the French from Brazil, basically, and and they were fighting with the Spaniards in the Treaty of Tordesillas. So why would they help a Spanish expedition? Weren't weren't the Spaniards the enemy? And well, very good question indeed. Because you see, in 1580, or I think a little before that, but a little before the 1580s, the Iberian Union took place. Because basically, the Portuguese king, Dom Sebastião I, died without leaving any heirs, and the only and his closest relative was a queen which was married to the King of Spain. So then what happened was the so-called Iberian Union, the union between Portugal and Spain under Spanish rule. And it persisted through four kings, four Philips, basically, the four Philips. So if I'm not mistaken. And of course, it's a period that, as I said before, the Portuguese don't like remembering very much. So you know, the Portuguese don't like remembering this period. They don't remember this period fondly. I wonder why. So because the Iberian Union was already, was already established, that's why if a Spanish expedition was passing through Rio and that expedition needed help, of course, at this point in the 1580s, it would no longer be seen as an enemy. All right. So, folks, this is it for our video. And well, in this video, hopefully we have at least tried to heal our bodies. And so hopefully in the next video, we will attempt to heal our souls. All right, so based on that little hint, I wonder if you can guess what the theme of the next video will be. If not, stay tuned and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!